Thank you very much for give evidence to us this afternoon. We're very grateful, and I think Parliament is also very grateful that you're agreeing to do these sessions. Could I just have confirmation that you're going to continue the practice of your predecessor of 3 a year?
Yes, indeed, Chairman. I'm happy to do 3
and logically,
attendances at this committee a year.
Bearing in mind there are very big events likely to take place at the end of March, it might be sensible to push scrutiny of the triggering of Article 50, or the proposed triggering of Article 50, and any accompanying government documents after the spring recess, and then we will have 2 meetings, one right at the beginning and one towards the end of the summer session.
That may very well be sensible, Chairman. I mean, I suggest that perhaps the clerk in my office will be able to talk about possible dates, and obviously the committee will have a view as to when they wish to do it. But it is going to be quite busy in the run-up to the end of March.
Yes, and so I don't think it's going to be realistic or practical for either of us. So that, I think, would be a more sensible arrangement. I think we go ahead on that basis. You indicated beforehand that you had 1 or 2 introductory remarks you wanted to make. Why don't you make those now, Prime Minister?
Yes. Well, thank you very much, Chairman. And I just wanted to make a few remarks that I hope will be helpful to the committee. But before I do that, I would just like to take a moment to reflect on the appalling news that came in from Berlin and Ankara yesterday. And we've seen very vivid images on our newspapers and television, and I think they've shocked us all. And I just wanted to express our condolences. I'm sure the condolences of all of us are with those who mourn and all those who've been affected, and we hold them in our thoughts today. I just thought it would be helpful to set out a little bit of what we've been doing in the months since the referendum, preparing for the negotiations on Brexit, which is obviously, first of all, putting the machinery of government in place. One of my first acts was to establish 2 new departments, the Department for Exiting the European Union and the Department for International Trade. This puts in place the mechanisms necessary to marshal the important work that needs to be done to make sure our departure is as smooth and orderly as possible. But we are taking a whole-of-government approach to the issue, and there are experts in all departments working on policies that will be affected by our withdrawal. And the machinery is working well, and I'd like to thank everyone involved for stepping up so quickly, which they had to do, once the result was announced. We've obviously also been engaged with other interested parties, including business and representatives from the devolved administrations. DEXU ministers have met more than 130 companies from every sector of the British economy since July. They've hosted 10 round tables with representatives from different sectors and joined 12 more around the country. Met all the major business organisations, visited all parts of the UK to hear about the particular concerns. I've also personally met a range of business leaders from a broad range of sectors and have been leading on our engagement with the devolved administrations. As we approach the negotiations to come as the United Kingdom, we want to have a truly joined-up approach. I've also been able to meet or speak to the vast majority of European leaders on a bilateral basis, and those discussions have been positive and constructive. Throughout this process, as you know, Chairman, I've been clear that I will not give a running commentary on our approach to the negotiations, because it's not the way to get the right deal for Britain.
Except perhaps before the Liaison Committee.
Sorry,
Except perhaps before us, so we'll see.
Well, I think, Chairman, negotiations are negotiations, and if one wants to get the right deal, one can't give a running commentary to everybody. But I expect some searching questions from the Liaison Committee in this.
We'll do our best.
But I mean, seriously, the negotiations will be challenging, and with any international negotiation, they will require some give and take. But where possible, I have sought to give reassurance to those who have legitimate concerns about the process ahead. So, as I've said, we'll get the best deal for those that want to trade in goods and services with the European single market, whilst guaranteeing we'll make our own decisions over how we control immigration, over our laws, ending the jurisdiction of the ECJ, and over the way we spend taxpayers' money. And although we're leaving the EU, we're not leaving Europe, and I want us to have the kind of mature cooperative relationship that close friends and allies enjoy, and I fully expect us to continue to work alongside each other on issues such as crime and security, where cooperation helps to keep us safe. As you know, and as you alluded to in your opening remarks, Chairman, I've said the government will trigger Article 50 before the end of March next year. We'll meet that timetable and don't intend to extend the Article 50 process. We've also said we will publish more information about our approach before Article 50 is triggered. I will be making a speech early in the new year, setting out more about our approach and about the opportunity I think we have as a country to use this process to forge a truly global Britain that embraces and trades with countries across the world. And just one last word, I wanted to say that it's important that we understand the wider meaning of the referendum result and respond accordingly. It wasn't just a vote to leave the EU, but to change the way the country works and the people for whom it works forever. And that's why my government's also embarked on an ambitious programme of economic and social reform to ensure wealth and opportunity is spread across the country and ensure everyone is able to share in the success we will make of leaving the EU. And I think these reforms are an essential part of our plan for post-Brexit Britain, and I look forward to going into more detail about those early in the new year. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, it's the detail we'll be looking for this afternoon, I'm sure, but we'll begin perhaps just on one point you made. You said you don't intend to extend the Article 50 process. Do I take it from that that it's the government's firm intention to have left the EU by April 2019, and by that we should take that to mean that the Great Repeal Bill, or Repeal Act, will have therefore come into effect, and that by 2019, in April, the direct applicability of law and ECJ rulings will no longer pertain in UK courts?
Well, Chairman, obviously, as you know, the timetable I've set out is that we will trigger Article 50 by the end of March next year. The treaty gives, under Article 50, a 2-year process for that discussion about withdrawal and the framework of the future relationship to be undertaken. And that would take us through, as you've indicated, to March 2019. I fully expect us to be able to operate on the timetable that has been set out in the treaty. Obviously, as we go into the negotiations, that's a matter for the negotiations, but I fully expect us to be able to operate, and in fact, the Commission has indicated a shorter period.
In all that, Prime Minister, I heard a no. It may be the case that EU law continues to apply in the UK, or have I misunderstood?
Sorry, no, if I may answer that specific point. The intention is to introduce the Great Repeal Bill to Parliament in the next year, in the next session, so that it will be in place at the point at which we leave the EU. It will come into operation at the point at which we leave the EU.
It will.
At that point...
It will definitely do so.
It will, yes. That's the intention. Well, of course, the nature of legislation is a matter for parliamentary debate. But the intention will be a repeal bill that will come into effect at the point at which we leave the European Union. But at that point, EU law will be brought into domestic law in the UK. I think that's important because it gives people a certainty at that point at which we're leaving the EU as to how EU law is operating, so workers' rights remain protected and so forth.
I'm just trying to clarify one very straightforward point. By leaving, do you mean, and what is commonly understood to mean leaving, that is that the EU law will no longer apply directly in UK courts, and therefore be justiciable in UK courts? When
we're outside the European Union, we will be determining our laws, and it will be British courts that will be determining our laws.
And that will be completed by 2019, in the end of...
Well,
in April 2019. Is that
I fully
what you're telling us?
I fully expect to be able to meet the timetable that has been set out in terms of determination of the deal.
Just one further point, therefore, of clarification. Article 50 provides for a country to leave more than 2 years after it's triggered as part of a withdrawal agreement. Do I take it from the answers I've just had that you are not seeking a withdrawal agreement that will lead you beyond the 2-year period?
We are not seeking to extend the Article 50 period beyond the 2 years. In fact, the European Commission have indicated that they consider that it may be that the negotiations would be completed before 2 years. But we're not seeking to start and say we want this to be extended, the negotiation process to be extended beyond the 2 years. I fully expect to be able to undertake the deal within that time.
Right, and that deal will not contain anything that could leave EU law directly applicable in the UK?
The intention is that when people voted, they wanted us to be able to take control of our laws. When we are no longer a member of the European Union, laws will be determined here in the United Kingdom and will be subject to British courts.
Okay. I'm trying to get clarity that that part of Article 50, which provides for the scope for negotiation of flexibility on the operative part of leaving, is not going to be exercised. It's not the intention of the government to try and make use of that flexibility.
What, as you say, what the Article 50 allows for is if there is an agreement that the period for negotiation of the withdrawal and the relationship with the European Union is extended, an agreement among the 27 but agreed with the member state concerned, i.e. in this case UK, then the treaty allows for that period to be extended. We are not setting out to extend that period. We are setting out to negotiate this within the 2-year time frame.
Okay. Hilary Benn.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister. This week marks 6 months since the referendum. There's just over 3 months to go to the triggering of Article 50. Can you tell us when the government's plan is going to be published? You referred to a speech you're going to give next month, but the publication of the plan, when will we see that?
Well, as I've indicated, I will make a speech early in the new year which will set out more of our approach. We will, before we trigger Article 50, be setting out, as I've indicated, more details of our approach. I haven't set a date when the plan is going to be published, but you will hear more about our approach when I speak in the new year.
Can you give the committee an assurance that the plan, when it does appear, will be published in time for Parliament to scrutinise it before Article 50 is triggered, and that there will be sufficient time for us to do our job looking at it?
Well, I have said, as I've said on many occasions, Parliament need have no concerns about its ability to have an opportunity to comment on all of these matters, and I would fully expect that Parliament will have a proper opportunity to be able to look at these matters before we trigger Article 50.
So what would be your view of a reasonable period of time for Parliament to see the plan in advance of the triggering of Article 50? Which is another way of asking when are you going to publish
It's another way of asking when I'm going to publish a plan, and I've told you I don't have a date for when I'm going to publish the plan. And I think it's not for me to set out a period of time when I think it's appropriate for parliamentarians. We will ensure that Parliament has an opportunity to look at these issues. We have, of course, to factor into this timetable the question of the Supreme Court judgment. We don't yet know what that judgment will be. They may, if they find in favour of the government, that leads us to one course of action. If they find against the government, obviously there will be a need to respond to the Supreme Court judgment.
Is it your intention to ensure that Parliament has a vote on the final deal when it's been negotiated?
Well, the Parliament is going to have every opportunity to vote through the Great Repeal Bill on the various aspects of the relationship that we will be having with the European Union.
That wasn't quite the question. The question is, when the final deal is negotiated with the 27, is it your intention to ensure that Parliament has a chance to vote on that deal, yes or no?
It's my intention to ensure that Parliament has ample opportunity to comment on and discuss the aspects of the arrangements that we are putting in place. We will be going through the negotiations. It's not clear at this point in time what I've indicated that my expectation of the timetable for negotiating the deal is. It's not clear, obviously. This is going to take two parties, the European Union and the UK, to go through that process of negotiation. So we will be ensuring that as we go through that, as I've said before, where we're able to give clarity, then we will do so.
I'm not quite sure I understand why it's so difficult to answer questions as to whether Parliament will have a vote or not, given that we know the European Parliament will have a vote on the deal. Why can't you say that the British Parliament will also have a vote?
Well, what I'm saying is that there will be an opportunity for Parliament, of course, to consider, as we're going through, when more details do become available, how this is going to operate. There is a question about the timetable in relation to the agreement of the deal and the necessity, how that timetable will operate in relation to the European Parliament as well. What I'm also clear about is ensuring that when we come to the point we are actually delivering on the vote of the British people, which is that we will be leaving the European Union.
Now, talking about the timetable, as you know, Michel Barnier said he expects the negotiations to be completed by October 2018 indeed to provide scrutiny of what has been agreed. Do you expect what are both complex negotiations about the divorce arrangements and the negotiation of a new agreement about market access and trade, do you expect those to be done